Okay, I brought a crown today. Today is called Christ the King Sunday. So I've got a simple question for you guys. Don't answer right away. Think about it. If you were king or queen of the whole world, what's the very first thing you would do? Like the moment you became king or queen, what's the very first, think about it, what's the very first thing that you would do if you were king or queen? If you were the ruler of the whole world and you were in charge of everyone everywhere, what's the very first thing you would do? All right, you get the crown if you're going to answer. Does that fit?
Yeah.
There. Okay.
Give it back.
Give what back? Give what back?
This.
You give the crown back? You don't want it? No? Andrew, you want to try? You have an answer?
Well,
Do you have an answer?
I do, but I don't want to say my answer.
You don't want to say your answer? Do you have an answer?
No.
No?
You just need. I don't want to pick it.
Okay, think for a minute. Should I ask someone out there while you guys think? All right. We're going to go out and find someone randomly, okay? There you go. If you were king, what's the very first thing you would do?
I don't know.
Oh, come on, pick something.
I don't know. What? Feed all the hungry.
Feed all the hungry. Okay. If you were queen, what was the very first thing you'd do?
Health care for everybody.
Health care for everybody.
Yes.
All right. You got an answer yet? Did you come up with an answer? You got one? You can wear the hat. It's a fun hat.
I would make everybody good.
Make everybody good.
It's not that easy. Oh, well.
All right. So here's my second question. I only got 2 questions. Do you think that that's the type of king Jesus was? That he was, the answer that you gave, Lane, do you think that's the type of king Jesus was? You think so? He was one who didn't want to wear the crown? All right. He wasn't demanding? Do you think Jesus was the type of king who was going to feed the whole world? Yes? No? Oh, we have a debate now. Do you think Jesus was the type of king who would feed the whole world? Yes? Do you think Jesus was the type of king who gave everyone health care? Do you think Jesus was the type of king who made everyone good? No? Well, we say that Jesus is king of the whole world, but not everyone's good today, are they?
No.
And not everyone has health care today, do they? And not everyone is able to eat something today, are they?
No.
And Jesus didn't give up his crown, did he? Because he's still king, right? You know, sometimes I think we think Jesus is a very different king than what he actually is. Just a normal person in disguise? No, I don't think he's like that. But I think what it means for Jesus to be king doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to suddenly make the whole world good. I think what it means for Jesus to be king is that he's going to make sure that every person in the world's cared for and loved. That even if there's someone who's out there who doesn't even think they're loved, that he's going to make sure that that person's loved as well. That there's no one in this world who goes without love ever. Because I think Jesus as king maybe isn't making the whole world not all of a sudden that there's no food, though that's what he'd like to see happen. But he's making sure that the whole world doesn't go without love. so that every single person knows, even when you forget it, that there is at least one person that loves them. No, not like that, because Thanos was mean. He was more like, he was more like if someone were to give an announcement to the whole world that says, I'm always with you, so that you will never forget that there's someone who loves you. All right, can we say a quick prayer? Say, God, thank you for being our King, for always loving us and never leaving us alone. Amen. This is a hard question. What does it mean for Jesus to be king? What does it mean for Jesus to say that Jesus is king when we know that the world doesn't have health care? When we know that there are people who are hungry in the world, when suddenly the whole world's not good, what does it mean for Jesus to be king? This is a real hard question. We got to ask this question. We got to think of an answer to this question. Pilate's asking him, are you a king? What does that mean? Because Jesus says, I'm not that type of king. I remember growing up, there were many times when I wasn't sure whether or not my dad loved me. Let's admit, you've heard this before, many of you. First of all, we'll admit, I was a thorn in my parents' side. We've said this before. If I wasn't annoying someone, I was being punished for having annoyed someone. And my dad had to punish me a lot. But worse than that, annoyance builds up in people, you know? So that even when you're not being annoying, you still seem annoying because they're still annoyed from all the annoying things you had been doing. That was often my dad's mood around me. A powder keg always ready to go off. But it wasn't simply that we fought that left a question in my heart. You see, my brother and I, we were night and day different people. And the person my brother was fit perfectly well with the person my father was. They both liked carpentry. They both loved working with tools. They both loved working with machines. They both loved farming. And when your father's a farmer and spends 14 hours a day working on the farm work, and your other brother loves doing the exact same thing that your dad loves doing for work, guess who gets all the attention? It's not the one who's not going out into the field because he doesn't want to be there. Me, I liked music. I liked learning things. I liked singing. I liked genealogy, of all things. I liked computers. I liked next to nothing that my father liked. And my father liked next to nothing that I liked. And the only time that our two interests really ever overlapped was when I was in sports. Other than that, we really did not have that much in common for the longest time. So you can see why there was a question that went through my head a lot of times, because the only thing I ever saw with Dad was the dad who needed to punish me. It wasn't until I moved to college and he called every single day that first semester while I was in college because he missed me that I realized that was a dumb question to be asking. Jesus says today that to be king, he came to testify to the truth. And Pilate asks him back a good question. What is truth? What is truth? There's a show I binge watched this week during the holiday week called The Good Place. Has anyone heard or seen The Good Place? A couple people. The basic premise of this show is a bad person ends up in the good place after she dies. Okay? And let me clarify, by bad person I mean mostly average. Slightly below average, honestly, but not completely horrible. Someone who at times is good and at times is not. But of course, being a bad person, by the end of her first day in the good place, she's already messed things up. And by the next morning, there are lizards, giant 2-story tall lizards attacking the whole village because she broke the good place. But she convinces her soulmate, who is a moral ethicist, not to expose her, but instead she continues in her lying ways, living in the good place without being exposed for who she really was, while creating chaos in her wake. Eventually in the show, you discover that the reason the people go to the good place, who gets to go to the good place and who doesn't, is because the sum total of their goodness, this is the old math symbol thing that we don't do in Lutheranism, the sum total of their goodness versus badness, the goodness outweighs the badness. Not just outweighs the badness, but extraordinarily outweighs the badness. That you're this much good than bad, that's not enough. You have to be like this much good compared to this little bad in order to get to the good place. And so she keeps trying to do good things in order to improve her ranking a little bit, eventually to maybe prove that she actually does belong in the good place, so that when the judge at the end of the season comes and judges her, she'll have enough good points to get to stay. Problem is, when you're doing good things for the sake of, my benefit and not anyone else's, she doesn't get any points. It doesn't help when you're helping other people for hidden reasons. The only time she improves her score is when she's doing something good simply because it was good, without any ulterior motive of her own kind. She kept covering up the truth, and I got to tell you, we are all good at covering up the truth sometimes. It began when Adam looked at God, and God said, "What'd you do wrong?" And Adam said, look, an elephant over there. Pointing at Eve, she did it. And we've been covering up the truth ever since. Sometimes we do it on purpose, like in the good place, where she kept trying to hide the reality that she wasn't good. Sometimes we do it by mistake, like with my father and me. Missing a truth even though it was there. But the result was the same. Something isn't right simply because what we have and know isn't true. I also watched a documentary this week called The Mask You Live In. In it, boys and men testify to the effect of those 3 most powerful words in any man's life. Be a man. What does that mean? Be a man. Man up. Grow some cojones. That's what our coach always used to say. At one point, they asked teen boys to write down what they let people see and what they didn't let others see. On the hidden side, boys wrote down pain, anger, crying, sadness, and one person poignantly, my heart. What do you suppose it does to someone when they feel like they can't show their heart to anyone else? Jesus said, I came to testify to the truth. And I've been wrestling with what that means. That Christ is king, and to be king, it means he's telling us the truth. And I've wrestled all week with what that means. And I'm going to make one small conjecture. There was a lot of thoughts that went through my head, but I want to focus on one little thing. For Christ to be king, it means that that's one place that we can always be true. We taught people you got to respect God. You got to be reverent towards God. You got to like when you're going before the king, you got to like act like something that you're not. And no, I think the answer is you get to be true with God. For God to be our king means you actually get to be true with God. When your truth fails all others, whether it's because you're scared of that truth, what that truth might reveal, or you just don't know how to speak your truth, like my father and me did not know how to speak to each other, your truth can always be before God. You can always be true with God. If you're angry, I tell people this one all the time because people feel like they can't do it. If you're angry, yell at God. God understands anger. God's lived through that. God knows perfectly well what it means to be angry and has had people yell at him throughout history. If you are angry, yell at God because he can handle that truth. If you're lonely, let God know. Jesus knew what it was like to be lonely. If you're happy and there's no one else to share it with because you're afraid that this truth just can't go anywhere else, share that truth with God. God will always share your joy. If you want to dance like a complete buffoon, then dance with God. God's a dancing buffoon as well. If you're messed up, let God know. Christ already knows all your flaws. Every unsightly zit, Christ knows. All those little pieces of fat that are showing up that you don't want anyone else to see, Jesus knows they're there. That complete and utter failure you do your best to hide from other people, Jesus already knows. That has been one of the most freeing things in my life. When I was in middle school, I flunked a test. You know how well I hid that from my parents? I did not let them know. It was February of 8th grade. It was algebra class. We had a substitute teacher. Like, I remember this. It's so horrible. I remember this. We had a substitute teacher, and because my main teacher, she was out on pregnancy leave at the time, and the substitute teacher, he wrote his X's like this, and he wrote his Y's like this. And I couldn't tell the difference. And I failed that test. I had A, F. And then my regular teacher came back in A. And that one test, I never showed my parents that test. But Christ knows. Christ knows, and it's okay. Christ knows and says, I decided you were valuable a long time ago. There isn't a moment that's changing that. But for me, that's one of my fears, is just that failure. I hide those things. I don't want people to see it. When I was in seminary and I was doing CPE, which is clinical pastoral education, and it's basically a summer job like being a summer camp counselor, but you're at a hospital being a chaplain. And things did not go right my first CPE unit, and I failed out. And I ended up not doing that. And I was living with a friend from college at the time, and I faked going to work every morning for the last 3 weeks in my CPE unit so that he would not know that I had failed out of CPE. Tell me none of you have ever tried to cover things up before. I know we all have. We try to hide things we don't want other people to see. Christ knows. Christ knows. Christ knows and isn't judging us. Christ knows and isn't looking at us with disappointment. Christ knows and isn't looking at us as if we're the most utter failures in the world. Christ knows and sees the things we've tried to hide from everyone else and says, you're someone beautiful to me. I know sometimes your truth is embarrassing. I know sometimes you don't want the rest of the world to see your truth. But your truth will never drive me away. Your truth will never put a gap between me and you and our relationship. I've seen it all, and I've decided that you are still worthwhile. That's what it means for Jesus to be king. Jesus has looked upon every person underneath him all the people that he created in the whole world and said, these people, they're worth it. They are worth moving heaven and hell and all of creation for, and that's what I'll do. I will move heaven and hell and all creation so that they know that they are worthwhile, so that they know that they are loved, so that they never forget it, even on the moments when they're like, I wish I had health care and I don't. And Christ says, you know what? I know other people have failed you, but I'm still right here. And we said, we need our daily bread, and we're not getting it. And I said, I know the world's messed up, and there are people who have not figured out love yet, and I'm trying to help them figure it out too. But I'm not going to let you forget it. Because it doesn't matter who's failing in this world. I've decided that this world is worthwhile, that the people in it are valuable, and I will save them all. Amen.